This next stretch is a critical one for the correction of excessive anterior pelvic tilt. It's called the kneeling hip flexor stretch. So this looks very similar to the starting point of the lunge, and you should get the same stretch at the bottom of the lunge as you do during this motion. So it's good for preparation. So we're going to start off with the front leg out so that the ankle is underneath the knee, and on the down leg, the knee is underneath the hip. This allows your posture to be upright, so you can work on your upper body posture while you're correcting the balance in the pelvis. So this stretch in particular works on the hip flexors. The hip flexors, we've got a number of them, but in particular, we're going to be focusing on the long muscle of the quadricep called the rectus femoris. So, easiest way to do this, get in the right position to start with, and go back to how I talked about the pelvis being a bucket of water. Pouring water out the front is going to be an anterior pelvic tilt. Pouring water out the backside is the posterior pelvic tilt. So what we want to do in order to stretch the hip flexors, which contribute to anterior pelvic tilt, is to go the opposite direction. Okay? So what we're going to do to initiate the pelvic tilt into a posterior rotation, or tilt, is to squeeze your butt muscles together to start with. So as Michelle does that, you'll see that her pelvis already starts to move into a posterior direction. Now, if you're really tight in the rectus femoris muscle, just squeezing your butt muscles and moving into a slight posterior pelvic tilt, you should already get the stretch going down the leg. Now, to intensify this even further, you can actually put a little bit of squeezing your abdominal muscles to further the pelvic tilt. That's the next piece. Now, to intensify even further, what we're going to do is maintain that posterior pelvic tilt and just shift your weight forward toward the front knee while maintaining the posterior pelvic tilt. And most people are going to need very little motion here in order to maintain this stretch. One of the common mistakes here is not holding on to the pelvic tilt as we shift forward. When that happens, we'll start to see an excessive curve in the lower back as an arch, and then you'll really be able to shift very far forward, and people will say, I'm not really getting that much of a stretch. So this is a mistake. So go all the way back to the start. Again, an aggressive posterior pelvic tilt with glutes, a little bit of ab tension, and then only move forward as far as it takes to intensify the stretch. Hold on to this position for the given amount of time in your program, then you relax. You can always stay on the same leg and complete all your repetitions and then switch. Now there is a more advanced form of this stretch as well, which I will show you, and it involves moving the body in a few different planes of motion. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Michelle to do the exact same thing that she was doing. Now she's going to place her hand on top of her head. Now what this does is it stretches the fascia in the body, lengthens, okay? Now she's already getting the stretch there because she's done the posterior tilt. As she does this, I'm going to ask her to side bend away from the side that's stretching to induce the frontal plane. And also, because she's in posterior tilt, we can also rotate her slightly, opening toward the side of the stretch. Now, what's important on this, again, do not lose the posterior tilt. A lot of people drop forward and start to arch their lower back, and they lose the stretch. So again, a little bit of tension in the abs, lifting that side up, side bending, and opening slightly toward that side. Doesn't have to be dramatic, and that will increase the intensity of the stretch. So hold for that time, come back to the neutral position, slowly unwinding and relaxing. Okay?